From data rails, this is FP&A Today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FP&A Today. I'm your host, Paul Barnhurst, aka the FP&A guy, and you are listening to FP&A Today. FP&A Today is brought to you by Data Rails, financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. Every week, we welcome a leader from the world of financial planning and analysis and discuss some of the biggest stories and challenges in the world of FP&A. We will provide you with actionable advice about financial planning and analysis. This is going to be your go-to resource for everything FP&A. Before I bring our guest on, couple reminders. You can earn CPE credit for your CPA or other accreditations through Earmark. You can go to the app, download the episode when it's available, answer the questions, and receive that credit for your continuing education. And second, if you've been enjoying FP&A Today, we ask that you leave a review on your podcast platform of choice, Apple, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this episode. We'd really appreciate that. So with that being said, I'm thrilled to welcome today's guest on the show. I have Joseph Clayton with me today from 68 Ventures. Joseph, welcome to the show.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, really excited to have you. So just let me give just a brief background, and then I'll let Joseph tell a little bit more about himself. So Joseph is currently located in Alabama. He works for 68 Ventures as a business analyst. He did his undergrad from Spring Hill, and he earned his MBA from the University of South Alabama. So, hey, Joseph, could you give us a little bit more about your background? Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up where you're at.
Yeah, definitely. It is quite an interesting and kind of unplanned way until how I found myself in kind of the financial planning and analysis world. So, like I said, I went to undergrad at Spring Hill College after growing up in Dallas, Texas, but moved to the Southern Alabama area for college, where I attempted to play college basketball, actually. And starting off when I went to school, I was planning on going to law school. So I actually studied philosophy during my undergraduate career with the sole intentions of going to law school right after graduation. But it was actually sometime during my junior year, I quickly realized that I did not want to go to law school. And it probably had to do with every time I talked to an attorney, they warned me to not go. So once the confusion came in there, I was kind of like, okay, well, where do I want my career to go? What kind of field do I want to get involved in? It was definitely kind of during my summer breaks where I was able to, work in a few customer retail facing roles. And it was really there that kind of, sparked my interest in business, and especially having conversations with these entrepreneurial minded, business owners that I worked for. It was real interesting to me. So, I immediately began taking business classes throughout the remainder of my undergraduate career. And right after graduation, I enrolled in an MBA program at the local university in the Southern Alabama area. And it was really there kind of going through the different business cases and seeing how important, finance and, financial data is in the decision-making process of a business, which really kind of, inspired me and wanted me to, continue on in that industry. So now I find myself as the business analyst here at 68 Ventures. And just real quick, we're a holding company for numerous operating and development companies in the Southern Alabama area. And, I get to play a part in, our story and our mission of transforming the Gulf Coast. And, I'm lucky to work with some great people and partner with, various business unit leaders across a diverse set of industries.
Great. And I appreciate that, and appreciate you giving a little introduction about the company. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And I can definitely see how a background, philosophy, a different way of thinking, and then MBA can help you in your day-to-day. But I'm curious, you mentioned you started out wanting to play basketball in college, and do you have a position you like to play? What's your do you have a team you like?
So I definitely used to be really good at basketball. Now it's a different story where, injuries and just, lack of practicing over the years. But now I played basketball my entire life, ever since, the age of 3, with hopes of going on to play at the collegiate level. So I was, very fortunate to go to a small liberal arts college here in the Mobile, Alabama area, continue on with my, playing career. It was short lasted just due to injuries and wanting to focus on, other objectives in school. But it was great. I played shooting guard, and again, used to be pretty good, but I don't brag anymore. I haven't played in a year or so.
Yeah, injuries and age will both take their toll. So we'll ask one more fun question because I'm a big basketball fan, and then we'll get back to the interview. But do you have a favorite team as far as college, NBA? I mean, obviously, other than where you went to school.
Yeah, definitely. So I've kind of lived all over, but I mostly grew up in Dallas and finished up high school there. So I'm a huge Dallas Mavericks fan, and I love watching basketball. It's my favorite sport to watch. I love NBA. I love college, but my favorite NBA team is the Dallas Mavericks, and I'll never forget when we won the championship in 2011. That was probably one of the highlights of my time. So what's your favorite team?
I'm from Utah, so I'm a Jazz fan. So I won't hold it against you to be a Mavericks fan. I get it.
We're doing pretty good this year. We'll be doing pretty good this year. Last year wasn't too bad. So
no, you guys got some good players. So all right, getting back to the podcast, everybody's probably going to be like, what are they talking about if they come in a little late?
Exactly.
All right. So I know you mentioned you're a holding company, 68 Ventures. If I remember right, I think you guys have 17 different companies.
Correct.
So you could talk a little bit about how finance serves across the business. Like, how do you support these different companies? What's the model?
Right. So just to give a over explanation of our business. So we're a holding company for numerous operating development companies all along the coast. We're mostly focused in construction, real estate, and real estate development businesses. But our vision is to transform the Gulf Coast, and we do that by partnering with purpose-driven leadership and providing them with necessary resources to go out and cultivate an impactful company and then realize their full potential. And what we do at the parent level is provide those resources to where they can excel. And we do that through, marketing resources, through technology, through offering financial and accounting resources, especially, lower startup companies, as well as marketing and just kind of overall leadership and business strategy. So that's how, we play a role in the space. And, originally our model was we were founded upon a vertically integrated foundation. So it all kind of started at the 68V parent level where, we're real estate focused. We're going out and purchasing land. And then we have another entity that, develops that land. And then one of our other operating companies and our largest one is a residential home builder. So our development company would develop the land, sell those lots to our home builder. And then we also have other real estate related businesses that have the opportunity to capture business from there once that home is sold. So like real estate brokerage, our title company, our pest control company, our landscape company, insurance, et cetera. So that's kind of how the model started, and that's where we are today. But we're kind of shifting to more of an entrepreneurial platform. We're still going to be focused in real estate and construction, but we kind of want to explore adding different industries under different verticals within our portfolio. So that's kind of the overall of our business. But I guess to explain where, finance plays a role is, we're kind of, our finance department at the parent level is kind of in every single, step of the way across our portfolio. We're here as a resource to the other accounting and finance teams across our portfolio and our operating companies, to help with just basic level accounting and helping, with software implementation, picking out the best accounting source that company, needs to use in their industry, as well as, we help establish the processes and the financial reporting to where, our companies are tracking their budgets on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis, and they're reporting that back to us at the parent level to where we consolidate those reports into, summarized views to give back to our, C-suite executives here and the decision makers to see how, the totality of our portfolio is performing.
That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like you're really buying these companies and helping make sure they're running as efficient as possible. On your end, it's the finance, it's the bookkeeping, being a resource for them. And that all makes sense. One other question I have is, obviously a lot of your companies are real estate. I know there's some others that are outside of that. But how does FP&A kind of work in the real estate industry? How do you look at opportunities? How far out do you forecast? Maybe just talk a little bit about that. Because I know from what I've heard and talked to people, it's a little different than what you traditionally see.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. It still is certainly like the other industries. But I would say probably the number one, differential factor, the one we kind of put more emphasis on is the due diligence process. And that goes for our development entities as well as our operating companies. But more specifically for the development companies, because if we're going out to purchase land, we tie up certain lenders and our investors to go out and purchase property. But we want to make sure we're getting that land at the value that we need in order to sell those lots at a profit, to pay back our lenders, pay back our investors. And also, really, it's at the due diligence level, which is highly critical in our industry, as well as the way finance is also playing a part is tracking throughout the schedule of that project. So once that development starts, we're making sure we formed the budget beforehand, but we're making sure we're hitting those timelines and those different phases and the goals within those phases, and just making sure that if we have certain type of construction delays, we're being proactive and we're seeing those in real time, and we're able to adjust and combat any issues that are occurring. So I'd say the biggest thing is just in our due diligence process, and then 2 is just being proactive and make sure we're performing at the level that we said we're going to perform. Just making sure nothing's kind of getting out of whack or going a different way. Because if so, that takes a lot into. It could be really costly just due to an interest carry we're carrying on a loan. That could really skew up the margins when the project is finally finished.
That is understandable. I can see what you're talking about there. And it sounds like, if I heard you, 2 things. There's the due diligence process, which is a little different. And then the second is really around the milestones. So it's almost a little bit, monitoring the operational in addition to the financial, that the role, and you definitely see different businesses where, they lean more or less on how much finance gets involved in operational. But if I was hearing that right, it feels like you definitely get pretty heavily involved, at least from a milestone and project tracking and those type of things, some of the operational parts of the business.
Right. Because, these projects go on for, it could take 2 years to, when you fully purchase raw land, and then to when there's a house built on top of that property. So it takes quite a while. And as we've seen just throughout the last year, how one thing can just change the entire market, where, we're just seeing through the pandemic where, supply chain shortages occurred. Material prices are rising, and just, how quickly that happens. And that can really affect a project that's, 2 years in length to completion.
Of course. I could see where, the littlest things can have a big impact when you have a very long lead time to recover your investment.
Correct.
You know what it is like. 13 different spreadsheets emailed out to 23 different budget holders. Multiple iterations, version control, errors, back and forth updates. You never really feel in control of the consolidation and collection process. Yep, I've been there. Stop, breathe. DataRels is the financial planning and analysis platform for Excel users. DataRels takes data from all your company's disparate sources. No organization is too complex, consolidating everything into one place, secured in the cloud. Now all your data finally talking to each other. Everything is automated back into your report in Excel. Cash flow, FX conversion, intercompany transactions, now automated and up to date. Drill down and variance analysis in seconds. Don't replace Excel, embrace Excel. Turn your Excel into a lean, mean FP&A machine. Find out more at www.datarels.com. Speaking kind of investment, shifting a little bit and recovering that, obviously something you have to track is your KPIs. What are those key indicators? So, you have a number of different companies. You have 7 different, companies. You have all these entities. I know there's a vertical integration, but how do you, at that corporate level, what are you looking at regularly, and how do you decide, what KPIs are most important with that many different businesses?
Yeah, so there's a process that we have at the parent company level across our, accounting and finance team, where we're measuring, our monthly performance across every single portfolio organization. So we have, processes in place where we send out, okay, here's your performance report that you have to report to, each month. So originally at the beginning of the year, we have a budget locked in, right? And then each month after, let's say, the 10th business day, we expect, a delivery back to us to see how our company performed. Was it in line with budget, within budget or not? So that's something we're constantly tracking, just our monthly performance and, how we can get that back to the parent company level as quickly as possible. And, it takes time. Every company is different. It may take a little bit longer for them to close out the books each month, but, we try to get that in a timely manner so we can consolidate that information and give that back to our, stakeholders to see, here's how our portfolio is doing on a monthly basis. Here we are in line with budget. Here's where we are year to date. And then, where are we going for the rest of the year? So that's something, we're always look at. That's kind of the financial KPIs that we hold, across every single company. But then when you kind of drill down to the, companies across the various industries, you kind of see there's different KPIs that we need to track. There's one KPI we're tracking at, our construction company that we're probably not tracking at our insurance company. So we have a whole different list of KPIs, we track that are industry specific. And one, for example, so we just look at our home builder, we're wanting to track our cycle time. So how long it takes from, when we purchase that lot, from that time to, closing of that home to that's sold. So this is one way we track, just because we want to make sure our home builder is, we're building houses in a timely manner so we can deliver, the proper expectations to our customer who's purchasing that home, as well as it measures too, are we improving better operationally? The faster you build a home, the more we can get to, the more we can, sell in hopes of increasing your, top line if demand's there. And then another one too at the home builder level is it was just a good indicator of just how much demand is out there in the market is our average sales price. So, and that's definitely one that we're going to keep tracking, kind of as time goes on. And there's a lot of things in the market that's, up in the air with, higher interest rates, stuff like that. We've been blessed with, the last, 1 to 2 years of just super high demand from the consumers. But now with higher interest rates and, you're starting to see maybe a decline. So we'll start to see, if our sales price is dropping, what the market demand really is. So, and there's a whole other bunch of KPIs. I have a whole list of them here, that we track at our global scoreboard meetings for our, our C-suite executives. But, it goes on.
I can imagine it gets pretty complex, and it's a challenge when you have 17 different companies of how you boil that down and focus on the key things. So I get that, and I can also see where some real challenges with interest rates going up, some headwinds, monitoring that closely and seeing how does that impact us, because right, for so many years here, interest rates have been rock bottom, and that makes it much easier to buy a house.
Yeah. Much more enticing.
Exactly. So it's a lot nicer when, I'll only have to pay this much in interest over 30 years versus how much?
Yeah.
So
a much easier sale. And that's why we're tracking that KPI so heavily across our home builder. But, there's various other KPIs we track across, some of our different companies, especially some of our startup companies that, have been in startup mode for, maybe just the last year. I mean, obviously we're always tracking cash, especially the ones that, we're just startup. I mean, they may be burning cash on a monthly basis. We need to make sure we have a high enough cash balance to, cover that burn. If not, then, we're having to, run a model out to see how much do we need to, inject into that company.
Yeah, cash burn. I can imagine that's a big one as well in a portfolio company. Mm-hmm. So my understanding is you guys do quarterly reviews with your different businesses. Imagine with 17 businesses, that's a challenging process. So can you talk a little bit about that? How does it work? Kind of how successful is it? Just walk a little bit through that process.
Yeah, it's definitely a fun process, and it definitely takes some days. When you have 17 different companies coming to discuss, how they perform for the quarter. It's definitely makes for some long days, but it's a very rewarding process. But kind of how I've explained earlier, we have monthly deliverables where we're reporting each month, how our company is doing financially, along with an executive summary that kind of gives us some more context to the business. What really is happening in operations? Do we hire more people? What are the challenges that you see the next month? Et cetera. So it kind of just gives more context to the numbers. And this is what really happens in our business plan reviews. This is kind of the intent behind it. Is kind of a more from a contextual basis. What's going on? the business unit leaders at these companies come to 68 Ventures with a presentation of just how we ended with the quarter and what are we forecasting for the next 90 days. But it really isn't so much about the numbers. I mean, because we've seen those numbers each month. We know where they're at financially, but it's more to kind of come into discussion about what's going on in the business. What are the challenges that you're starting to see, and where are we going to end up, remaining of the year? But also, are we in line with the business strategy? I mean, each year we're setting out, business plans where we have operational goals to set, and even projecting 3 years out to where we want to be, and are we doing those proper steps in order to get there? And if there's any headaches that are arising and challenges, that's the time for them to discuss with us as business partners. How can we better combat these issues? So it's a dialogue. It's nothing too crazy, but it's also making sure from our standpoint, our mission is to help these companies realize their full potential. So it's us being good business partners and holding them accountable to the business plan.
I really like what you said there at the end, is it's us being good business partners and holding them responsible to the business plan. Because that's, a key part of finance. And sometimes that can be a real challenge because you want to be a good partner. You want to, work with the business. But when things aren't going well, sometimes you have to challenge the business and, there has to be some push to help them get where they need to get. So, any experience there, any advice you'd offer when you're in those situations that are challenging, where you really have to push on the business for whatever reason? Anything you found to kind of help in managing that from kind of that business partner and relationship standpoint?
I mean, I think what's really awesome and advantageous from our perspective at the parent level, I mean, we're, overseeing so many different companies, and they're all different and maybe in industry and how they perform every day, but a lot of them are facing the same challenges across the board. That can be in, labor issues, material price increases, you name it. So it's been great to kind of be a part of those conversations, see where everybody's coming from, and be able to offer advice that we've seen, or maybe you should go, use our other, partner as a resource, and he's combated this issue this way. Have you thought about this? And also at our level too, we've been blessed with some great people around here who have a lot of experience across a wide amount of industries. So I think that's what's really helpful, us just being involved in so many different aspects of business, to where we can kind of give better feedback and dialogue if one of our partners is having an issue or having a challenge. Okay, we can talk through it. This is how this other person combated this problem.
Got it. That makes sense, and that's great that you have good resources there to assist and help with that. So appreciate the answer there. I know you guys recently automated your reporting process, and I've heard that you selected DataRails for that. Obviously they're our sponsor for this podcast. What were some of the manual processes you had before you adopted a solution? And what ultimately made you guys, adopt a solution and move toward more automation? What was kind of that driving point that made you go ahead and put a tool in place?
Right. Yeah. You just mentioning manual processes, in the past, you're giving me, some flashbacks and nightmares. But no, I mean, that's a good point. And it's a great question because, I'm sure a lot of businesses are still undergoing a lot of manual reporting back to, their business leaders, their managers, or their holding companies, whoever. But kind of how I explained earlier, we have certain deliverables for each operating company to report back to us, how they're performing financially. And beforehand, I guess just to explain, that was all a manual process. We set up these Excel templates with a profit and loss, income statement view, and just plain up in Excel where you have columns with months at the top, and then at the rows, your kind of budgeted figures, and then we're tracking actuals to that. So each month, that was an expectation to where, the finance and accounting department would probably literally have to pull up, their P&L and their certain accounting system, look at all of it, and then manually type each line item by line item, how they performed. And again, that would just take forever. That's an expectation, once a month, and then you add on quarterly business plan reviews, the budgeting process. So in totality, that takes up a lot of time. When really that's the area for automation. So we were able to, purchase financial planning and analysis software, data rails, and automate that financial process to where we have so many companies on all different types of accounting systems, but this software allowed us to basically integrate all into one database to where we can, have that be the source of our financial or our monthly performance reports come out of there, being able to, it links to Excel, instead of having to type each month, you just press a refresh button and there's your monthly figures, there's your performance. And this is great too, because, it's been able to increase our monthly reporting times by 15%, which is huge. Just getting the information back to us faster to know, okay, we don't have to wait, 20 days out to see how we performed in the prior month. As well as it's ensured complete data accuracy too. I mean, beforehand, when you're manually keying in, if you, wait a month and you go change the invoice date, or you've just found this invoice or this bill in, your mailbox or so, and you're finally typing in it was for last month. I mean, that's not going to update in your manually updated Excel, workbook. So it's been able to, save faster times across all of our teams and ensure, that we're looking at the latest and greatest information, and that's getting back to us. And also the other business unit leaders across our organizations, where they can see where they really stand and make decisions from there.
If I was to sum up what you said, it really came down to the manual process was just not maintainable. You had higher chance of error, took a lot of extra time. It's not fulfilling. Nobody wants to copy and paste. So being able to have a tool that automated that process just got you out of what I like to call Excel hell.
Right. Exactly. And I mean, the big objective for us was, how can we get our teams to no longer just be, performing data entry each month and when performing these, reports, but really, how can we spend more time looking at our data and performing analysis rather than just manually typing it in, So that's been huge across all of our teams, and they really appreciate the work and the more time they have to really look at and analyze how their business is performing.
No, that is huge, right? The more time you can spend analyzing than preparing data.
Exactly.
Everybody wins in that situation. The employee, the managers, leadership, because you get more value for what you're paying for. Nobody wants to spend all day doing manual processes. It's not fun.
No.
So that is great that you've got real value out of that. So how are you using it? Are you using it, for financial and non-financial reporting, or maybe talk a little bit about, what kind of reporting and beyond just the P&L and the different companies? Are there other things you're doing with data rails?
Right. So we're mainly using it for the financial reporting process, but what's so amazing about this software, it's always evolving. We can, we're also very early stages into it. We just implemented this about a year ago. It takes some time kind of getting comfortable and transitioning people from the old way to utilizing this new software. Some people get kind of accustomed to doing it how they were before. So it takes a little bit of time to, implement across the team and get it all set up, make sure it's all accurate. But it's been, ever since we implemented, it's been, great. But again, we're mostly using it for our financial reporting processes.
Sure.
But what's been a really big value add is all like the data visualizations capabilities that a platform like this has, to where, our business unit leaders across our companies and even here, our C-suite executives, can look at this information, in real time, accurately, in a very quick, easy, summarized view through a data visualization. And this is also what's been really awesome. I mean, especially what I've learned throughout business is there's a lot of, presidents and business unit leaders out there that they're not always diving into their financials. They're thinking more high level strategically. They may not even know how to look at a, P&L and really see what's going on. But what we've been able to do is, put these quick executive dashboards together for each team to where, they're being able to get, emailed every day, a quick report, or they're going into their login through the software and seeing, where they stand for that day, where they're forecasted to be end of the year. And if there's any gaps they need to strategically think through, it's there right in front of them.
executive dashboards and having that ability to quickly get that snapshot is huge. So I can see it's obviously provided a lot of value for you. I know it's still early and a lot of work to do, especially when you're implementing it across 17 different companies with different accounting systems and all those things. That's a long time to get that all worked out. So I can see, that you're still going through that process and finding ways to continue to improve the value you receive from the tool. So that makes sense to me.
It's ever growing. That's what's awesome. The software is always updating to where, there's new tools and new applications there that, will better help us and suit our needs. And I guess from a timely investment, it's totally worth it where, it takes time setting up that process. But then once you get there, it's a click of a button and your data's flowing right to you and you can see where you stand. So it's kind of like we talked about earlier, the importance of that due diligence process, setting things up correctly first, then you kind of finally see the fruits of your labor after it's all said and done.
I love what you said there about setting things up first, because any digital transformation, any software program that you're putting in, you want to make sure you understand the strategy, you manage that change management. But the third one, and I think is often forgotten, is you got to make sure your house is in order, so to speak, like the data, and then it's all going to come together. Because last thing you want is to get done and then have no value from your tool.
Right. And
nobody ever wants that.
And that was our biggest issue. We're, a company with numerous companies below us. We have, 17 operating companies, but we also are involved in, development process where we have maybe 30 active developments going on at once with all different books. And we need to see where they're at, what their cash needs are, how they're performing. This tool has really allowed us to kind of see the big picture. And that was, I remember the first question when I, came to 68 Ventures, are you familiar with business intelligence? And that was kind of our problem. Just, we have so much data out there, but we just need to make sense of it. We need to kind of clean our house and able to, pull it accurately and then be able to make those insightful, decisions from it.
I think that's a challenge a lot of companies face, right? You got to synthesize the data and, like you said, be able to make intelligent insights, just, critical. So speaking, a little bit about this experience, sounds like it's gone really well for you guys. How do you think about ROI for an investment like this? Like, how are you determining, are we getting our money back? Was it worth, the time we spent? How do you guys think about that?
Right. No, that's something we've been asking ourselves all the time, and we definitely see the benefits of all the costly investment and the time investment too. It's freeing up, again, our time. We're getting reports, a lot faster from our operating companies. It's freeing up, our personnel in the accounting departments and finance departments across all the operating companies. It's more time to be analyzing that information, providing better information back to their stakeholders. But I would say really the major ROI, how you really measure that is, through time and how it's, what it's giving you. I think it's hard to really quantify that in number, but I think just from the time investment, it's a capital investment. You have to, purchase the software. But if you look at it, you're freeing out people's time. Maybe they're maxed to capacity at 100% of their time by just doing bookkeeping and manually typing and reporting. But you can free up their time by 50%. And, that's huge. And maybe beforehand, if you stuck to those manual processes, maybe you would have to hire on another team member to keep up with all the information that's going on, especially as your business grows. But, what's been awesome is just leveraging the software to free up more people's time. And, we've been seeing the, massive ROI on our investment. It's been great so far. And we're looking forward to, the more information it provides us.
Now, that makes a lot of sense. Great to hear. The ROI, as you mentioned, is all that time saved, right? You got people like, maybe I'd have to hire another person. It's hard to exactly quantify. I get it. And as finance people, we always want to put a dollar on it. And we try our best to, but sometimes you got to look at it holistically and it becomes obvious that it's paid for itself. And that can be a challenge, especially for us number nerds, as I like to say.
Right. Especially if you're...
I'll at least call myself one.
Right. Yeah. Especially if you're, doing manual processes now and you're trying to, sell, your, managers, hey, we should look into this tool, but it's a huge time saver and, it'll pay you back, major dividends.
Well, everybody loves a good time saver. So thank you for sharing a little bit about that. We're going to switch gears here a little bit. I know we've been talking for a while now, and we have a few more questions here for you. This next one, this is one we like to ask everybody. As you look at FP&A, I know you've been working, as a business analyst and supporting finance, a little bit of operations, but what do you see as the biggest challenge in FP&A today? Just, you could speak to that in your company, you could speak to that, more broadly. And then the second part of that is, what do you see as the biggest opportunity? What's out there in both of those, challenge and opportunity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge that I face when it comes to an FP&A and financial modeling is maybe I'm just too OCD, but I want to be 100% accurate when I'm modeling out a certain scenario. But that is clearly not the case and clearly impossible. But that's one of my biggest challenges. I'm always want to know the exact information I need to make my proper assumptions. To see if we're going to acquire a company or we're going to expand to this geography and this business, what it would really look like, a year, 2, 3 years out. But, it's impossible to be 100% accurate in some of your assumptions. But that's one thing, the president of our company has been, really advising me is you don't have to be 100% accurate, really as long as you're directionally correct. So that's probably the biggest advice. That's one of the greatest pieces of advice I've had so far in this role is when it comes to financial modeling. It's okay not to have all the information at first. You can still come to make assumptions, and then as long as you're directionally correct in your conclusion, and you can kind of see, the ROI on a certain investment or whatever you're modeling out. But I think for me, that's my biggest challenge. And I'm curious, your thoughts on that too.
Great question. So first, talking to the challenge, as I like to say, if I could forecast perfectly, I'd be sitting on the beach somewhere as a millionaire.
Right.
I wouldn't be working in finance, right? We're not soothsayers. We don't have a crystal ball. It really is about assumptions and grounding our assumptions in reality and validating them. And as you said, being directionally correct, right? I made that point the other day. It feels great. We all love it when you're like, oh, I was spot on this estimate. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, that's not really what's expected for us, right? The idea of the project is to give us enough comfort that we're going to get a return, that we've reduced risk,
right,
that we can make intelligent decisions based on the data. And as your boss said, which was great advice, be directionally correct. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think the biggest challenge, I would probably say there's two. One is the amount of data we deal with in the world today. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was on a webinar this last week and I did some research, and in 2022 alone, we'll create 94 zettabytes of data. That's 94 with 21 zeros after it. Mm-hmm. Every 2 years, the amount of data we have is doubling in the world. Think of how long the world's been around. Now we're doubling it every 2 years. Mm-hmm. So I think dealing with data and being able to boil it down and find insights is a real challenge. I think it's a huge opportunity as well. And then the other is really continuing to ensure that we're focused on being business partners and value creators. It's easy to get caught in the spreadsheet and the numbers and all the financial work, and that's important. And there's nothing wrong with spending time on that. But if we're not taking that and giving the insights and providing the value, we're missing out on that huge opportunity. Mm-hmm. I think it's a challenge sometimes in finance to really get that seat at the table and make sure the business sees us as a value creator, that they trust us, that we're the trusted business partner, not just the ones they have to go to get something approved or to get a report.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, like you said, there is a lot of data out there, and sometimes maybe that's my issue. Sometimes there's so much information, and I want to be able to quantify it all in my assumptions. But right, I think it's kind of getting to that point. You're kind of differentiating between finance people are kind of in the daily details, kind of in the weeds. But to add value, we need to be able to kind of think more higher level. I guess mm-hmm. What are we trying to accomplish with this question that we're asking in this certain model? But no, that was a great point.
Yeah, we got to be more strategic and think big picture, not just in the weeds. And that was very hard for me in my career. It held me back for quite a while because I'm good analytically. Mm-hmm. I'm very detailed. I love working with numbers. And I had to remind myself, okay, my boss doesn't want all the details.
Yeah.
He wants me to get to the point. And I had a few times where they had to tell me, just get to the point, Paul. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I had to learn that one the hard way.
Right. that's a big challenge. But yeah, like you said, that's kind of where the opportunity is, kind of be more thinking more strategic, more high level. I think that all goes into, as well as knowing, before you perform an analysis, what's your objective, what's your business question, what's the problem you're trying to solve. So really, it's kind of, again, like we talked about, setting up things perfectly or setting things up, correctly at first.
Yeah, there's having a hypothesis, following an approach versus just playing with data to play with data, right? You want a reason to it most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Next question I have for you here. This is one we like to ask everybody, and it's, can you describe a time you experienced a failure at work? And what did you learn from that, that experience? It could be an analysis that went wrong or something you tried to implement that didn't go as planned. And just to give you a little background, the reason we like to ask this question is really, we look at it as long as you learn from something, it's not really a failure. And so we're asking people kind of, what did you learn from a time when things just didn't go as planned? Because we've all had it. I know I've had my fair share.
Right. No, it's a good question. And that's the way we learn, is through, trying something and failing, and then, learning over and over again. But I think, a time that we experience failure, and this is a good point, just like kind of communication on, from the finance department to, our stakeholders, to our teams, anybody else. It kind of has to do with implementing our software. People get so used to, accustomed to a certain way. And if you don't, communicate with them clearly, we're changing this process. We want, do you start reporting it this way? A lot of things can get out of whack. The output, the report you're trying to generate, may look completely different when you attended. It may just not be accurate. So maybe that's the time when we kind of rolled this out and maybe didn't explain, perfectly or in better detail of, this is the tool we're using. This is how it works. We want you to, report this way. So, and it's all learning experiences. But that's one thing I've learned just being in business the last few years, is just communication. Everybody communicates differently. You need to know your audience, and, I think it's a learning lesson every day with something like that.
It definitely is. And it sounds like, if I'm to summarize, as you rolled out the software, there were some challenges around communication. And there was a real lesson that reminded you the importance of just communicate, and communicate again. You can't really over communicate.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I've been there as well, where sometimes a failure to communicate, or even if you think you communicated, a failure for them to recognize, there's a misstep there, can really result in some pain. So I agree. We learn that every day.
Right.
Learning to be better at communicating is something that helps us in every aspect of our life, professional, personal.
And then communicating, like, hey, we're rolling out this software. Yeah, maybe a little bit of headaches up front, you having to learn maybe a new tool, but this is how much value it's going to add to you in the future. And I guess our problem was we just didn't communicate the value add in the beginning. Everyone recognizes it now, how much, it's saving them time, more accurate. Our, presidents of every single company is happier with the faster reporting times. But we could have done a better job explaining that up front. But, it's all learning lessons. We got plenty of them here, especially across so many different companies.
Yeah, I have plenty of learning experiences myself. And yes, anytime you can clearly articulate the benefit, it will help make those processes easier. Mm-hmm. So that's a great point there. So now we're going to get a little more personal. This is kind of a fun section we have. And this is a question we ask everybody. What is something unique about you that you could share with our audience? Like something we wouldn't find online, something that just kind of makes you unique.
Mm-hmm. So I've actually, I said I grew up in Dallas, Texas mostly, but that's probably not the full truth. I've actually moved quite around a lot of the United States early in my life. I think I've lived in, sometimes I lose count, kind of like I lose count how many companies we have sometimes. But I think I've lived in about 4 different states, and some of them, 3 different times, moving back and forth, and some 2 different times. But I've lived in, I was originally born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, lived in Colorado, I lived in Dallas, Texas, lived in Florida, and now I'm in Alabama. So I guess that's, 5 states right there. So quite moved around a lot. People always ask me if I'm a military family. No, just, my dad was actually in finance. Just opportunities came, relocation. So there, and I guess another fun fact from there is I actually went to 3 different high schools, but I actually finished at the high school that I started. And one of those other high schools was in a different state. So
Now, you said fun fact. Was that really fun when you were in high school and had to switch that off?
it was fun. I got, made a lot of friends, especially with social media today. My followers increased across all the social media apps. So that's been, that's been a huge plus. But what's
that's a great attitude, because I know a lot of times teenagers, that's really hard to be moving a lot when you're in high school.
Right. So what's something unique about yourself that you can share?
Oh, let's see. Couple things. I'll go with, I once met Jimmy Carter. I was on a flight coming back from London, and he got on the flight, and he actually took the time. We ended up taking off a little late because he went around and shook everybody's hand on the plane.
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
That was kind of cool. And the funny story to that, I'll add a little bit to that. The guy next to me, he's from the US, he's probably older than me, and he looks to me and he goes, "Who is that?" And I was just like, okay, I can understand if you're from another country, I had no idea, but come on, you should know who Jimmy Carter was. He's a pretty recognizable face. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that's Jimmy Carter. You can see the Secret Service there. You can see the...
Yeah.
So
correct me if I'm wrong, but he was grew up on the peanut farm. Is that?
Yeah, correct. Georgia, I believe.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that's how I know Jimmy Carter.
Yep, 1970, I believe it was 76 to 80, I think, and then it was Reagan.
Right. Okay. What year was this when you saw him?
Oh, when was this? It would have been 2008 when I graduated from grad school. Date myself a little bit.
Yeah, that's not too long ago. That's awesome.
But yeah, no, it was really fun. It was a cool experience. All right, so this is another one of my favorite questions. As you can guess, I'm a big Excel nerd. You can see all the books back there. Yeah. So we're going to ask you, what's your favorite Excel function or formula? It could even be a feature, but what do you like best about Excel?
Yeah, I love this question. It's funny. My answer is easily index match. It's probably the function I use all the time, daily, but I love seeing the memes across, LinkedIn saying, are you more of a VLOOKUP or an index match kind of person? But, I used to be VLOOKUP, but once I went index match, never looked back. So that's been, a great function. And I love it. And then I guess another, fun, just kind of more simple, formula or function of Excel. I just love using, the equals sign as in, does this cell equals this cell in order from all my check references? So, that saves me, a ton of time just setting those up, early on the front end. And then I recently discovered a little while ago, Power Query, function in Excel. And that's been a huge game changer. So those are probably my top 3 kind of uses of Excel.
I get that. The equals for the checks, the index match, and the Power Query. Power Query was a game changer for me as well.
That's great.
I think it's funny because everybody, when you ask a function, they say index match, like they have to be used together, right? Even though they're 2 separate formulas, and you can use VLOOKUP match and you can actually use XLOOKUP match.
Right.
I just think it's interesting how we've associated the two. Like, it's almost like they're kind of married in a sense, right?
Yeah. I've had a few errors where I forgot the match part. I'm like, wait, why didn't it give me what I wanted? So I've definitely married the two.
I've had my share of mistakes when it comes to that formula and trying to figure out why it's not working.
Right.
That and a whole host of formulas, but that's pretty common. So last question here. We're at near the end of our time. So if somebody was starting their career today and they wanted to work at, say, FP&A, what advice would you offer to them?
I think my best advice, to someone who's wanting to get into FP&A or who is currently working in it and wants to advance their skills is, just be open to learning. What I've learned so far is, business is so complex and there's something I'm learning every single day. And I'm blessed to be, at a parent organization where I can see, across various different businesses, various different organizations and industries. And there's a lot going on. I'm not an expert in one industry at all, but I'm a student of business, and I think that's what kind of the mindset you have to have is always being a constant learner. Because when you're diving into a company, to perform a model, you're really learning. You need to learn that business right there, and it's challenging. But that's what's so rewarding. Embracing that challenge and getting through it. That's kind of your reward right there. But just being a constant learner is mind versus be eager. and just embrace the challenge, as well as if you're wanting to generate better financial modeling skills, is start to dive into Excel a little bit. I mean, I had no Excel or financial modeling experience before going into my master's courses, and really came out with little to none either. But I've used my outside resources, and really the best way I learned is just having a problem and then working through it. I mean, I remember one time I asked a professor during my graduate career, how can I be a better Excel? He's like, well, you really need a problem. You can't really just open an Excel document and just start, here's the sum function, here's this, but you need to have a problem that you're trying to solve. So it's definitely a learn by doing, but that's the rewarding part.
It is definitely one of those things you learn by doing, and well said about being a lifelong learner. Serves you well in every aspect of life. And it's a great advice for anyone at any stage of their career, not just beginning. So really appreciate that. Just one last kind of question here. If somebody wants to follow you or reach out to you, is there any way they can contact you, find you on LinkedIn, or anything you'd like to share as far as that goes?
Yeah, definitely. I'm on LinkedIn. I think I want to say, linkedin.com/Joseph Clayton, as well as, my email is jclayton@68ventures.com. Any hate mail is, gone out through our cybersecurity system. So please say only nice things if you're emailing me.
I'm sure it will all be good things. So appreciate you sharing that with us. And just a reminder to the audience that, if you want to earn CPE credit, your continuing education credit for this course, you can go to Earmark, and you'll be able to answer a couple simple questions and get credit for listening to this podcast. And then the final reminder, if you enjoy FP&A Today, we'd love for you to leave a review on whatever platform you use, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you're listening to it. And then last and most importantly, Joseph, thank you again for being on the show. We've really enjoyed having you. I've enjoyed the conversation, as I'm sure our audience has. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Absolutely. I've been a big fan of this podcast. So thanks for all the work you're doing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Nice of you to say that.